mortality rate is considerable, less than 1%. This was confirmed by the head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases for the U.S., stating, "The overall clinical consequences of COVID-19 are similar to those of severe seasonal influenza, having a case fatality rate of approximately 0.1%. In addition, data from the hospitalized patients with COVID-19 and general public indicate that the majority of deaths are among older and chronically ill individuals, supporting the possibility that the virus may exacerbate existing conditions, but rarely causes death by itself. SARS-CoV-2 primarily affects the respiratory system and can cause complications such as acute respiratory distress syndrome, respiratory failure, and death. It is not clear, however, what the scientific and clinical basis for wearing face masks as protective strategy, given the fact that face masks restrict breathing, causes... Here's really something that people don't even think about. The psychological effects of wearing face masks. Psychologically, wearing face masks fundamentally has negative effects on the wearer and the nearby person. Basic human-to-human connectivity through face expression is compromised and self-identity is somewhat eliminated. These dehumanizing movements partially delete the uniqueness and individuality of a person who's wearing the face mask, as well as the connected person. Social connections and relationships are basic human needs, which innately inherited in all people, whereas reduced human-to-human connections are associated with poor mental and physical health. Despite escalation in technology and globalization that would presumably foster social connections, scientific findings show that people are becoming increasingly more socially isolated, and the prevalence of loneliness is increasing in the last few decades. Poor social connections are closely related to isolation and loneliness, considered significant health-related risks. A meta-analysis of 91 studies of about 400,000 people showed 13% increased mortality risk among people with low compared to high contact frequency. Another meta-analysis of 148 prospective studies, 308,849 participants, found that poor social relationships was associated with 50% increased mortality risk. People who were socially isolated or felt lonely had 45% and 40% increased mortality risk. Respectively, these findings were consistent across ages, sex, initial health statuses, causes of death, and follow-up periods. Importantly, the increased risk of mortality was found comparable to smoking, exceeding well-established risk factors such as obesity, physical inactivity, and an umbrella review of 40 systematic reviews included 10 meta-analyses demonstrated that compromised social relationships were associated with increased risk of all-cause mortality, depression, anxiety, suicide, cancer, and overall physical illness. As described earlier, wearing face masks caused hypoxic and hypercapnic state that constantly changes the normal homeostasis and active fight or flight stress response, an important survival mechanism in the human body. The acute stress response included activation of nervous, endocrine, cardiovascular, and the immune systems. These exclude activation of the limbic part of the brain, release stress hormones, adrenaline, neuroadrenaline, and cortisol. Changes in the blood flow distribution, vasodilation of peripheral blood vessels, vasoconstrictions of visceral blood vessels, and activation of the immune system response, secretion of macrophages and natural killer cells. Encountering people who wearing face masks activates innate stress, fear emotion, which is fundamental to all humans in danger or life-threatening situations, such as death or unknown unpredictable outcome. While acute stress response, seconds to minutes, an adaptive reaction to challenges and part of the survival mechanism, chronic and prolonged state of stress, fear is maladaptive and has detrimental effects on physical and mental health. The repeatedly or continuously activated stress-fear response causes the body to operate on survival mode, having to sustain increased blood pressure, pro-inflammatory state, and immunosuppression. Sorry about that, man. About my mom. Conclusion. The existing scientific evidence challenges the safety and efficacy of wearing face masks as preventive intervention for COVID-19. The data suggests that both medical and non-medical face masks are ineffective to block the human-to-human transmission of viral and infectious diseases such as SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. Supporting against this usage of face masks, wearing face masks has been demonstrated to have substantial adverse physiological and psychological effects. These include hypoxia, hypercapnia, shortness of breath, increased acidity and toxicity, activation of fear and stress response, rise in stress hormones, immunosuppression, fatigue, headaches, decline in cognitive performance, predisposition for viral and infectious illnesses, chronic stress, anxiety, and depression. Long-term consequences of wearing face masks can cause health deterioration, developing and progressive on chronic disease and premature death. COVID-19 will cause a catastrophic due to collateral physiological damage such as quarantine, lockdowns, unemployment, economic collapse, social isolation, violence, and suicide. Chronic stress along with hypoxic and hypercapnic conditions knocks the body out of balance and can cause headaches, fatigue, stomach issues, muscle tension, mood disturbances, insomnia, and accelerated aging. This state suppressing the immune system to protect the body from viruses and bacteria, decreasing cognitive function, promoting the development, and exacerbating the major health issues, including hypertension, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's disease. Rising anxiety and depression states cause social isolation and loneliness, and increasing the risk for prematurely mortality. The existing scientific evidence challenges the safety and efficacy of wearing face masks as preventive intervention for COVID-19. The data suggests that both medical and non-medical face masks are ineffective to block the human-to-human transmission of viral and infectious diseases such as SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. Supporting against this usage of face masks, wearing face masks has been demonstrated to have substantial adverse physiological and psychological effects. These include hypoxia, hypercapnia, shortness of breath, increased acidity and toxicity, activation of fear and stress response, rise in stress hormones, immunosuppression, fatigue, headaches, decline in cognitive performance, predisposition for viral and infectious illnesses, chronic stress, anxiety, and depression. Long-term consequences of wearing face masks can cause health deterioration, developing and progressive on chronic disease and premature death.